Hey guys and gals, welcome to RacerXOnline.com. I'm Kris Keefer. To the left of me is Kenny Day. We are at Fox Raceway and we are here for the 2024 RM-Z launch, but Suzuki was nice enough to bring the number 94's race machine straight from the Los Angeles Coliseum, as well as another bike that he had set up for Chicagoland. We're gonna go out here right now and try it and test it. They're giving us 30 minutes only. So Kenny and I are gonna team race this whole thing, and we're gonna come back to you, break Kenny's bike down, maybe give you some insights comparatively to the Honda that I rode. But we both are big fans of Kenny, of course. You're Kenny's guy.
I try to be his guy.
Yeah.
I try my best.
So what better than Ken on Ken Love right here. We'll be right back. We're back. First of all, I want to thank the whole team from Twisted Tea, HEP Suzuki. They've been working their tails off. All of the team is here today to please us media dorks that are going to ride all of these bikes. We had, of course, the stock bikes, and we had Kenny's bikes here. So it's really nice for them to come out after a long season and to cater to us and give you guys some insight on what it's like to ride the number 94's machine. Now, before we break it down, you're very familiar with 94.
I am. When
you're out in Florida, 94's grinding, he's testing, how much stuff does he change on his bike? I mean, from afar, obviously.
He's extremely particular.
Yep.
I'll say that. Like, he's very serious about his comfort. We talked on the phone about this as well. So I'd say he's constantly changing, but he also understands that he can't go too far into that, right? At some point, he's got to find something and go with it. So there's times when I'm in Florida and he's just running through stuff and making people run circles.
Yeah.
And then there's other times where he's doing what he needs to do.
Well, what I like about Kenny is no matter what, he makes you work for it, right? But he pays you off with results. And this year has been unbelievable. I mean, just the last round at Los Angeles Coliseum, there is no one besides Chase can keep up with Jet, and there he is, right on him. So for whatever they're doing and they're working hard, man, it's been paying off, and we got to ride his bike. So we also got to talk to him after he rode his bike, and he broke some things down. He's like, look, I'm a European rider. I like a more softer setup. I need comfort. If I don't have comfort, I can't go fast. So for me, I can understand that. You vet riders can totally understand that, because we need comfort built into our machines so we actually can ride more than 2 laps. So that is what I gathered, what we call, you guys see it in the video, there is a black shroud bike and there is a yellow shroud bike. So the yellow shroud bike had more of a Supercross setup on it, and then the black shroud bike was more of a hybrid setup for SMX. Now, I'm gonna start with you.
Yeah.
We did 2 laps, went back and forth, did the whole team race thing, and then we got on the other bike. Break us down what you thought about the bikes, and then we'll compare.
So for me, you know, it's funny too, is like, I think I'm gonna process this the whole way home. And tomorrow I'm gonna be thinking about these things, about what I felt. Initially, just hopping on the black shroud bike, the hybrid that had the Chicago suspension on it.
Yep.
So more of an outdoor setup, but also stiff. Just initially, as soon as I got on it, it was such a different feel for me. it took me a little bit to get used to how loose his front end was. There's all these little things about rider triangle and like my personal comfort that just felt so off. So it took me probably 3 or 4 laps to get comfortable. Once I did, I really felt a lot of freedom in the engine.
Yep.
A lot of coming into the corners, I didn't feel any engine brake. Everything felt very smooth, you know? So that was the first thing that stood out. Secondly, I expected the engine to be like a
rocket,
a rocket or something, you know?
Yep.
Knowing Ken and knowing the years I've been with him to see how he's changed, whether it was a Honda or the Suzuki, he always is like kind of in the meat of the power, like a lugger.
Yep.
But getting out there on that bike, I felt like I had to use the clutch at times because I felt like it was so low. What I found out with more laps was that the power was there and it was hooking up, and I had a ton of traction on the hard pack stuff.
Yep.
It just wasn't explosive, and it took me a second to process that kind of stuff.
So for me, the Chicagoland bike, what we call it with the black shrouds, unbelievable. Kellen behind the camera here, we were talking about if you could put a percentage on how much better or much more comfort Ken's Chicagoland bike had versus stock, I'm gonna say 50 to 60%. Just because the initial touch is a lot more forgiving.
Yeah.
Coming down out here at Fox Raceway, of course it's late in the day now, it's hard pack. The stock bike feels stiff, it feels rigid. On the edge of the tires, a little bit of deflection. Ken's bike, it's almost all gone. So the touch is amazing, there's less vibration. On the edge of the tire, it has more tire contact patch. And if I can refer to a little bit of a test that we had to go in Washougal with the Honda team, that's similar to what Jet's bike felt from the stock bike. Just more comfort, more traction, and just easier to ride. You vet riders out there thinking, oh, you know, these pro bikes, they just must have a whole bunch of front side and a lot of bottom end. That's not the case. There's a lot of connection, and connection is your right hand, how much it's connected to that rear wheel. How much, if you move that right hand, does that rear wheel move you forward? There's a lot of that there, but it's not a jerky feel.
Correct.
So you could roll on second gear. I had to downshift to first gear sometimes on the stock 450 today in some of these corners. I could run third gear on Ken's black shroud motorcycle. So I need comfort just like Ken. I'm old, I don't wanna have rigid feel. I wanna be able to ride at 2 in the afternoon and be on the edges of my tires and have a nice tire contact feel, and that's what that bike brings. I wanna bring up a point that I didn't know he had, but I went out and rode it, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's no engine braking.
Zero.
So he runs a slipper clutch, which I've ran some in the past, but I haven't run a clutch like this that has that much of a drastic feel compared to a stock bike. Like coming out of this hill, if there was big bumps, like at a Pro Motocross National where you have these huge, large braking bumps, it's gotta come in handy.
I mean, not only in the bumps, but I think another thing for me too is I kind of revert back to how it felt when I rode two strokes.
Yeah.
How you come in and you don't feel anything. It's just going straight through the bumps. The big thing for me was how easy I could just pivot.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't anything kind of like pushing me into the turns. It took away that feel.
Yep.
So I could get in, and if the rut had a bunch of chop in it, I could get in and just hop out like real quick.
Yep.
Those little things that like bring, I mean, ultimately they're gonna bring me a lot of comfort.
Yep.
So.
Stock clamps, they say that they're running stock offset. I feel like they're not, but they're only gonna tell us so much, right? I can ask Larry Brooks a question. I have to look at his face and really see if it's a poker face or not, but I feel like we might be on some different races, maybe a different offset, but there is a stock RM-Z250 clamp on that. Mm-hmm. He is running KYB suspension. He's not running a Showa setup. We talked to Ken on the phone. He likes Showa. He prefers Showa in Supercross, but he loves KYB in outdoors. Okay. And for us normal people out there, that makes sense because Showa has more of a performance-based, deader feel to it when you ride with Showa stuff. KYB, more lively, a little bit more comfort. So I think that rolls over into the professional ranks with Ken as well. So I can understand that. The next thing is stock clutch lever. His bar setup, he's on the 996 twin wall bar, a little bit wide for me. Did you notice that?
Wide, tall.
Yeah.
And really, really skinny grip too. Like there was nothing to his grip.
So I feel like when they make his aluminum throttle tube, they mill it down. Because it felt smaller, right? Yes. So, which makes sense. He's very picky with gloves.
Extremely picky with gloves.
So maybe he's just picky with his hands, period.
Yeah, that's true.
So his Supercross suspension, I went back and forth on this bike, and I came back, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a different bike. I originally didn't know it was. They're like, yeah, that's of a stiffer setup. And I'm like, that makes sense. Kenny rides it, and
I loved it. I mean, we can define the term love, but overall, I felt a lot more comfort on that. I felt more stable on that bike. It felt more probably what I'm used to in a stock production bike. It didn't have that free feeling coming into the turn, so I was able to just kind of go back to what I'm used to and use the power and the engine braking to slow down. Mind you, yeah, it had Supercross suspension on it, so the hold up through the jumps, all those things, I was able to push through the jumps.
Yep.
I love that, but for sure the chop coming in and coming out of some of the ruts, yeah, that sucked.
Yeah, I think also too on his other bike, he had a little bit of a different ECU setting. That's what it feels like to me. It felt like a little bit more touchier.
Yeah, more roll-on power.
Yeah, so maybe his gearing, I didn't look, but I think the gearing was a little bit different. So I came in and told Chiz that. I go, I think it's a little bit different. And he's like, yeah, I think we changed some things in the ECU. So it's not exactly the same, but it's nice to feel the differences that what he likes at different tracks and different conditions. And of course, these 3 rounds of SMX have been really frustrating for these teams to try to set up the motorcycles. And being as good as Ken, I'm sure they're working overtime and all that kind of stuff.
I think everyone around Ken's always working overtime, just because ultimately we all know that what he's capable of and what he can do. And as you said, he always repays us, right? Not only is he grateful for the people around him, he's going out and he's being passionate and he's putting in results. So,
and he makes kids say please.
He does.
That's awesome.
He does.
I appreciate that, so thank you. So you kids out there, if you're looking for something from Ken, get some manners before you go up to him, because he's not going to give you anything, which I appreciate. I'm a father and I like that, so I like that a lot.
Yeah, that was an adjustment for me to see it come out of his mouth for the first time when like a kid asked him for goggles.
Yep.
And he very clearly was like, if you ask, please, maybe. And since that, yeah, I respect it. You know, I've also been that little kid.
Yep.
And I think every time that it happens, it is a shock to the kid's face, and he realizes like, yeah, you know, you do need to be polite in these situations.
Yes, sir. So for you RMZ owners out there, you RM Army, you have hope. There are tons of things you can do to your bike and make it really well. From what we understand, you can go get this engine from Jamie at Twisted Development. He does the engines there. Not that hard to get a Vortex ECU and map it to that engine. Do some suspension work. If you want to get some KYB suspension on there and make yourself a 94 replica, you probably can get pretty close. I don't know if you're going to get all of the comfort that 94 has out there, or ride like him. But man, for me, when you're on someone's bike, I just launched that thing. When you're on a factory bike, I went through a corner a couple times and you just get a glimpse of the number and you're like, dude, I feel sick right now just because I'm on number 94. But then you get really beat down really quick. You're like, I suck so bad.
Yeah, I can tell you one thing, whether my name's Ken or not, and he's my friend, I didn't look anything like him today.
So thank you to everybody over at Suzuki, HEP, Twisted T. It's been an honor to ride these guys' bikes. I've ridden quite a few this year, so it's really fun for me. As you can hear in the background, these guys are still ripping, so be sure to check back to more tests here on RacerXOnline.com, and we'll see you on the next go-round.